which paradoxically is what I did exactly at the same age. I resigned from Bristol and walked to Stonehenge. He did his Stonehenge walk and went about 50 miles north of Rome and just became a sort of happy spiritual seeker living in the countryside. And some of his friends from Rome came and joined him. And a little community formed. And then, to cut a long story short, he migrated down to the south of Rome to an amazing mountaintop called Monte Casino, which I've been to on pilgrimage. And that's where he set up his main monastery, and he stayed there the rest of his life. If you haven't been to Monte Casino, it is to die for. Amazing, beautiful. You can get a bus up to the top. The town of Casino is at the bottom of the mountain. You can get a bed and breakfast or whatever. I stayed there for a few nights. It's fascinating, and there's a great museum in Casino which is absolutely worth seeing. And it tells the Battle of Casino, which is one of the most tragic battles of World War II. I'll come to that in a minute. Benedict was a lover of God, you know, and he loved God through all his soul, heart, mind. He took Christ's teachings to heart. And so in his monastery, he insisted people spend a part of each day in study. So it had books, right? Like here, it was a scriptorium. Every monastery in the Benedictine order has to have a scriptoria where people make books. They write them. In those days, it was all done by hand, you know. So they were writing these books out lovingly. And that's how we kept some of the pagan ancient classical knowledge alive, because Benedict was clever enough to know that those ancient works, you know, are really, they're just very important. So Cicero's letters, yeah, write them up. Aristotle, yeah, write up what you can find. So in the Benedictine network of monasteries that then spread from Monte Casino all over Western Europe, everyone had a scriptoria and a library. And so the monks were really just like scholar monks. They spent a large part of every day in what was called divine reading. I mean, what's not to like about that? Okay. They also had to spend part of the day in physical manual work in the gardens, or making clothes, or in the bakery, or working with the herbs. You know, you've all seen Brother Cadfael in the monastery at Shrewsbury, near where I used to live in the Welsh Marches. That's a typical Benedictine monastery, and Cadfael was the medical chap, and they would grow gardens for plants, for physic. And these monasteries then spread throughout the whole of Europe, and they kept alive the flame of classical learning and Christian learning, and they reconciled them. To be a proper Benedictine scholar meant you had to know all your classical stuff, but then you had to know where the Christian stuff kind of superseded it, because much as we love our Cicero and our classical works, I mean, there's something lacking. There's a certain depth which the New Testament provided. And so they would go into enormous detail in their studies of the New Testament. Anyway, I went to Monte Casino, and I actually got into the library. That's been one of my lifelong ambitions. And, you know, I pleaded. I mean, the monks at first said, hang on, tourists don't get into our library, you know, that's for the monks. And I explained, I showed them some of my credentials. I had a Vatican reader's card, which was helpful, which I've been to the Vatican Library as well. And in fact, it was in the Vatican Library that I saw a book on the library of Monte Casino, and that's what made me want to go there. Because I discovered, reading in this Vatican Library book, that Monte Casino Library was really, really important. It kept alive manuscripts and texts that were not existing anywhere else. They were destroyed. And it really has an important collection, you know. And I wanted to go and pay my respects to it. To me, you see, going to visit an ancient, important library is like, I don't know, to me it's like a pilgrimage, okay? So finally they let me in, I couldn't believe it. And I spent a few hours in the library. Unfortunately, I didn't get access to the actual books. I mean, I was hoping that I'd be able to wander around and look at the stacks, but no. You know, you can sit here in the reading room and you can order a book. So You look through the card catalogue, which is all on, like proper card index things, and then you can order some books. So I did. I ordered a few. I ordered one on the history of the Benedictine order. And don't forget, Westminster Abbey was a Benedictine monastery. Canterbury was a Benedictine. Glastonbury was. Most of the great abbeys of Britain were founded and pioneered by Benedictine monks who were scholars, all of them. Shrewsbury's another. And, I've been to them all, but they're all ruins now, most of them. We have, and unbelievably barbaric, when Henry VIII shut them all, he had most of the libraries destroyed. I mean, for God's sake, this is Sophiaphobia. I've coined the word, fear of wisdom. He was terrified of Catholics ticking him off for, his lust problem. And so what did he do? He burned all the libraries. I mean, come on, Henry. I mean, that's just so naff. So naff. Poor old John Dee, who's one of my heroes, he knew how naff that was. And he was trying to find all the lost books from Glastonbury Library and all the rest of it. I think I've got some of them here, actually, because I spent years in all the libraries and bookshops in Britain trying to photocopy stuff and finding all the lost manuscripts, Anyway, so it's to die for. Benedict's library is still going. If you get a chance, go to Monte Casino, spend a few days there. And the battle was horrendous. I mean, the battle was where the German army had decided to make a stand against the Allies that were coming up from the south of Italy. They'd landed in Sicily, they were coming up Anzio. And because it's quite imposing, this mountain, they couldn't get through. And the battle went on for weeks. And the monastery was declared out of reach. Nobody was allowed, no soldiers of either army were allowed to have weapons there. The abbot insisted he was neutral in this battle. He wasn't on the side of the Germans or the Allies. He was on the side of the kingdom of God, like a proper Christian. Please don't come into the abbey. Now the English falsely claimed that German snipers had taken up positions in the abbey, which was not true. I discovered this in the museum. No, there weren't any. It was a fake propaganda. Remind you of anything? And one night, the Allies bombed the entire abbey to smithereens from the air, just dropping bombs, claiming that the Germans had taken it over as snipers, which was a lie. And the abbot, who had said, we're neutral, don't come anywhere near us, the agreement, I think, was 300 metres from the abbey's grounds, no soldiers allowed. The Germans had stuck to this. And the response by the Allies, so-called Allies, the British and New Zealand Air Force, was to bomb it, and the Americans, to smithereens. And it was actually a war crime. I discovered this by going to the museum and casino. And there's a good bit of the story, because what happened to the library? What happened to the Museum of Sacred Objects that had been given to the casino monastery for the previous 1,000 years? It had gifts from emperors and kings all over Europe and queens. They'd given even their crowns, their jewels, whatever, as a sign that they'd come on pilgrimage there. There was an amazing story I discovered, which is a member of the German army, a colonel or something, had realised that the Allies were not going to keep to their word, and knew that they were probably going to bomb the thing. He just had this gut feeling. And we know his name, I can't remember it now. And he organised, off his own bat, with his own authority, he organised a fleet of lorries to take everything in the museum and the library out of the abbey and to transport it to the Vatican. He was a Catholic, I presume. A man of culture, he loved civilization. He knew that if everything stayed up there in the monastery, it would all be destroyed. And he organised this fleet of lorries, which secretly, for, 10 days or whatever, got everything out in time. And it's an absolute miracle that he did that. I actually want to make a film about this, because I think this would make an amazing story. Nobody knows this story. I didn't know it before I went to Casino. Did you know the story before? The good German, we're always taught they're evil and wicked and, kill them all, but hang on, the good German saves the treasures of Christendom, and they take them to the Vatican, which was neutral territory. I mean, he could have, if he was a really nasty Nazi, he would have taken them all to Berlin and stuff, but no, just gave them to the Vatican, which was neutral territory, and they survived the war there. And I discovered all this going around the monastery, the museum called Historial in Casino Town. And I was very moved, I have to say. And after the war, it's a miracle that the Italian government decided to rebuild the entire abbey. And they funded it with the church. And they rebuilt it stone by stone, block by block, back to how it was before the war. Only better. They built it with beautiful white, sort of crystalline stone. It is, being up there in the sunshine as I was, is just amazing. And the views are incredible all over the place. And then they returned everything that had been in the Vatican in safekeeping. They put it back in the museum and the library. And it's there still to this day. And Benedict was declared a patron saint of Europe, which is well deserved. And so we honour his memory today, and we honour the people that in the middle of war still think about preserving culture. And I contrast that with the way when the Americans attacked Baghdad, they just let the museums be ransacked and destroyed. The kind of barbarism that... And I do think it's a problem with American war fighting, is Americans love to bomb stuff from the air. I realised that when I was in Monte Casino. I mean, there's no finesse and there's no courage in bombing somebody from the air. I mean, they did that with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they've got all these missiles poised to bomb every city in the world. You know, that's the American war fighting style, which is unethical. I mean, that's no other way to put it. And also cowardly. But anyway, there we are. That's my experience of going to St Benedict's monastery and Monte Casino, and I wanted to share that because it's, these are lessons that we can all learn from, and let's hope we never have World War III. World War II was enough, thank you. Right, I want to move on to my next point here. I just want to say that I'm organising this study day of Mary Magdalene, the Mary Magdalene Studies Association, and quite a few of the books of Mary Magdalene to do with apocalyptic stuff, Gnostic literature, my deep studies over the years, the Mary Magdalene Gospel. You know, this is where I've done my commentaries on all that. And I've done commentaries on Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, all of which are here, and also on St Thomas's Gospel. This is my command control centre. So you're in the study of the scholar at work, okay? And with any luck, we're not going to get bombed. And so come to the Mary Magdalene Studies Day. It's on the 22nd of July, that's in 11 days' time. And it's going to be fascinating. We have some great talks, people that care about truth. And, Mary Magdalene fascinates me because she was obviously an amazing woman. She was probably the closest female disciple, stroke consort. I mean, maybe she was Christ's consort, who knows? Maybe they had what I call a wisdom affair. There are hints in some of the sources that may be the case, although the official church condemned her as a prostitute, but that seems to be just fake. It's just like an attack against a woman's good name. I mean, she was perhaps an initiate into the goddess mysteries. Remember I was talking about Isis? Well, Key Longfellow has written a whole novel based on research that Magdalene spent a lot of time in Egypt in training in Alexandria. And she's working on the second edition, the second volume. I'm hoping she'll speak at our event. We have, other scholars coming, and it's going to be online on Zoom. You can email me, and you can come on the 22nd of July. We launched that thing here in this Museum of the Muses, as it's called, but it can't take place in person at the moment because of the lockdown and everything. Hopefully next year we can have it back in person here. And the motto of the Benedictine order that's above the door when you go in to the monastery, and you can go as a museum, you don't get to get in the library like I did, but you can go and look around the museum. It's amazing, amazing. and all the things there were recovered after the war back from the Vatican. I mean, precious, precious things that are like hundreds of years old. And above the door it says labore et orare, so work and prayer, the two things that keep civilization together, work and prayer. I couldn't agree more, Prayer is where you interact with the absolute, the supernatural, the divine, God, goddess, whatever you call it, higher nature, and work is what flows from that. What you do as a service for the world, for your fellow man and woman, because of your commitment to the supernatural, universalist, co-intellectual absolute that surrounds us all, right? I mean, for me as a scholar, my work is my scholarship, my books. I've written more than 50. I'm still writing books on divine mathematics or, Encyclopedia of Druid Studies, whatever. I'm still hard at work, and I'm doing a commentary on the Quran as my, one of those. But I've worked at many things. I also I'd do anything really. It's just I think that's my calling, is to be a scholar. I mean, I'd be happy being a train driver or whatever. I used to sweep the streets of Kemp Town when I was a 20-year-old. I mean, that was a fun job. I loved being a street sweeper because you see life from the gutter, so to speak, and it's fascinating. But I think there's so doing physical stuff's good too, but I think really the most important thing is to do what is your calling, your vocation, and to do it with love and with passion. My work as a scholar is my passion. Okay, just a comment on the today is important because it's Wimbledon final and everyone loves Wimbledon. I certainly do, and even though I grumbled about Henry VIII, at least he used to play tennis. So we have this wonderful Serbian, Djokovic, I think is going to win. The match is going on as we speak. And he is quite a clever man, this Djokovic chap. He deserves to win. He's a very good player. But I won't comment too much because, who knows, the Italian guy might win. But I think Djokovic apparently likes meditation. He lives in Monaco, which is in the south of France here, and although he's a Christian, he loves also the Buddhist meditation practices. So he's obviously some kind of an intellectual, and I know Serbia, I know Yugoslavia well. I love it, and yeah, so good luck to him. But if the other guy wins, good luck to him too. The thing about tennis is it's a wonderful sport. I used to play it myself as a boy, and it's fun. Nobody gets hurt. That's the most interesting and good thing about tennis. Okay, talking about people getting hurt, I want to mention the work ongoing of the International Commission of Inquiry into the etiology of COVID-19. I mentioned this before. I'm running this commission of inquiry. I'm in contact with virologists and epidemiologists and forensic medical specialists into the question of etiology. I mean, that's the focus of our commission, to find out where it came from. And, it is extraordinary that we still don't know as a planet. I'm doing my best to find out because I think it's really important. In medicine, you can't really treat a disease till you absolutely know where it came from. It seems to me, from what I can tell from feedback I've sent it out to over 100 world-leading experts in the subject. I'm getting two kinds of responses, one of which is it's a natural phenomenon, it's evolved from an animal, and the other is no, it's showing signs of being engineered. This is a bioengineered product which somehow has escaped. In other words, it's a bioengineered weapon. And I'm following up both hypotheses. As my job is to suspend judgment, to do that epoche thing, not to predetermine and I'm looking at the evidence, and it's very interesting. But I think it's important that we find out as a planet. So I'll continue to, look into it, and anyone that has any evidence that can provide some, documented research. There's a chap I've come across at the University of Hamburg in Germany who has spent 6 months doing research into the origin of it, and he has kindly sent me his paper, this 50-page document. He's gone into this with a fine-tooth comb. He's leaning in that it's probably a bioengineered thing. It shows signs of being tinkered with. I suspend judgment, but he's one of the people that will be giving evidence to the Commission. I note with interest that President Biden also has called on the American intelligence network to research this, and we're halfway through the time period. He set, 45 days ago, he said, within 90 days you will give me an answer. So we've got 45 days to find out, which according to me will be sometime at the end of August. I'm looking forward to what Biden's going to be told. The American intelligence network has access to huge numbers of staff, information sources, the dark web, all kinds of stuff they can find out that I don't have access to. I'm just doing it like in the public domain, so to speak. So let's hope they can really find out what caused it. What I think is going to be very interesting is how are they going to tell Biden if it turns out that this was funded by Americans? Oh my God, University of X, University of Y funded research in Wuhan, which then escaped. Will they tell him the truth, is my question. How will we know if they've told him the truth? Is Biden going to get up and make a public announcement 45 days from now? He's going to say, my fellow Americans, I have some really bad news to announce. Turns out this coronavirus we're all suffering from, it was made in a lab. And guess what? It was us that paid for it. I'm very sorry. If it's true, I hope he has the courage to say that, because you've got to level with the people, not just Americans, but all around the world. We deserve the truth, Mr. Biden. I was reading in the New York Times, I'm an honorary citizen of New York, it's my other home, that a lot of the apartments and the great high-rises, the office buildings of New York, they're all empty now, because the offices are all leaving town. There's no point. They've learned that you can do most of your business from home on Zoom, so why pay huge rents for offices in New York? They're all moving into the country. So New York's going to become a ghost town because of this pandemic. I think the American people deserve to know if actually it was American money that paid for this, and to find out who did, who authorized it. Because if it was, it's supposed to have been outlawed under Obama, bless him. He did a few things that were very good. And then it was under Trump, it was reauthorized again. But there was supposed to be a fail-safe check thing that really dangerous research wasn't allowed. And yet it looks like, it just went ahead and happened anyway. So there are some serious questions American intelligence needs to ask of its own people. And I think it's really shocking. So let's just hope that the truth is told. I'm looking forward to Biden's announcement, and I will let you know if you don't find out first. As a scholar of the history of intelligence, it raises lots of very interesting questions about who controls intelligence and who authorizes what it researches. Anyway, Biden has made it clear that that's what they've got to find out within 45 days from now. So good luck to them. I hope my colleagues are going to find out the truth. And my commission will be doing the same. And with as much objectivity and fairness to all arguments and hypotheses as are possible. I want to move on then and talk about the World Intellectual Forum, because the Commission of Inquiry into the Etiology of COVID is a joint project of my Institute of Peace Studies and the World Intellectual Forum. You know, we're like the non-aligned World Economic Forum, but for all intellectuals, not just economists. And I'm the European coordinator. Why does intellectual work matter? Well, ask St Benedict. You know, why was scholarship part of the work he was doing? Well, you know, Abelard had this wonderful word he coined called intellecting. Intellecting is a verb. It means thinking through things very, very deeply. And it's not a luxury, it's an absolute necessity. Unless we get intellecting on the cause of this COVID, it's going to happen again and again. Unless we get intellecting on the solutions to the military capitalist pressures that that pay scientists to research gain-of-function stuff, and yet people are starving, you know, just in downtown Portland, they're living in tents and can't eat. You know, unless we get intellecting about this and protesting and campaigning and joining the dots and changing the system, those military elite capitalist war barons are just going to go on taking us for a ride. And it's what's happened in Britain. They're the people behind Brexit. You know, Johnson is paid by, the equivalent of, the military industrial capitalists of Britain, a lot of whom are American. I mean, they've taken over a lot of Britain's defence force and run, you know, kinetic and all these sort of things. And the nuclear, so-called nuclear deterrence is actually American. It just happens to be on British-made submarines. The missiles are made in America, and the Americans keep the key. So they can never be fired without the Americans giving permission. So really it's just a sort of excuse to park more nuclear weapons of Americans offshore in Scotland. That might be coming to an end when the Scots finally wake up and read their St Columba and St Drosten and realise that, hey guys, we've been taken for a ride here. You know, we don't actually want to participate in the destruction of all humanity. That's not what Scotland's for. So yeah, intellecting is very important. I just want to mention a few things. So this book by Peter Kingsley, In the Dark Places of Wisdom, if you haven't read it, don't know about it, go out and order it on Amazon, you know, or from your local bookshop. Here's a map of the classical world. I love Peter Kingsley. He's a great scholar. He's a kindred spirit. He's written about, in this book, he looks at the ancient traditions of Parmenides, who his culture came to a city called Velia in the south of Italy, not too far from Monte Casino. It's on the coast. And it was settled from Greece, and it was settled by a priestly order, priest kings from Greece. And Parmenides was the last one of the line. And he was a philosopher who went to Athens. He met Plato. Plato wrote the Parmenides dialogue about him. And Parmenides talked about being. Do you remember Parmenides insisted there's only one absolute being, which is everything. And that is God. That is us, that is God, that is you, that is me, that is consciousness. And everything that appears to be different is just like a flickering wave on the skein of the absolute. And this brings with it the ethics of interconnectedness. It brings non-violence. It brings love. Because we're one being, we can love each other. We're like a shoal of dolphins swimming in the sea, like in that magical film, French film, Blue, which is about, you know, dolphins and the sea. So Parmenides was a fantastic thinker. But what's so important about this book is it puts Parmenides and the role of the Greek intellectuals into their spiritual context. Parmenides was a priest of Apollo, not just a kind of thinker, whatever that means. He wasn't just a thinker. He was a shaman. And in the Parmenidean tradition, you go into the dark, you go into the absolute through a retreat, going into a sanctuary, an inner journey, and then you find the absolute. you find the goddess of wisdom. And Parmenides wrote a great poem about how you find the goddess of wisdom, which has come down. And dear old Karl Popper, who I did meet, who was a professor of philosophy at the NSE, and where I did part of my degree, Popper wrote about the pre-Socratics and had a great love of Parmenides, actually. Popper was a clever man, and he was much more mystical towards the end of his life, which is when I met him, and people realise he wasn't signed up to the Vienna School of Logical Positivism. He was much too clever for that. He was a dissident. So, yeah, Popper was a Parmenidean, actually. So I looked that one up. And then, of course, being leads on to being and time. This is Heidegger's great work, which you may know of. If you haven't read Heidegger or discovered him, he's worth it. He was a great German intellectual who influenced the existentialists of France, Sartre, all that lot. And he wanted to find out what is being. What is this thing that we all are? What is being? And then he discovered, well, there's a problem, because this being thing is always being persecuted by time. There's this other thing called time. It's always cutting across being. We never have time to be. I don't have time to explain everything I'd like to today. I might not be here next week. I might die. You might. Time is there's never enough time for being to be itself, was Heidegger's point. So what is the relationship? What is the dialectic between being and time? He explores it in wonderful subtlety, and in his other writings as well. And he was typical German in his ivory tower. He didn't really get involved in nitty-gritty politics. He became a rector of the University of Fribourg. And, Hitler was running Germany, and people complained that he should have joined the resistance. He should have got active and joined the White Rose Society. And the thing is, I think in his own way he was being a dissident, because if you read subtly what he's talking about, he was an intellectual dissident, and he was a great, he wasn't anti-Semitic. Hannah Arendt, one of the greatest Jewish women philosophers of the 20th century, was his lover, for God's sake. They were wisdom lovers, Heidegger decided it's better to hide out as the rector of a university. He could help more than being locked up in a prison and joining the actual resistance. I think he was part of an intellectual resistance at a much more subtle and sophisticated level. And then I want to also flag up Hegel, because, as you know, Hegel is one of my heroes, and he was of an earlier generation. This is my study where I'm essentially trying to update these works. So in my book, Being and Knowledge, which is like the sequel to Heidegger's Being and Time and Sartre's Being and Nothingness, in my book, Being and Knowledge, I've gone into the whole thing in much, much more complexity, in the tradition of Parmenides and Plato. And I think the real dialectic to examine is that tension between beingness and knowledge. What is it in the human being? What is this knowledge obsession we have? Is it possible to know the absolute? And if so, why are there different versions of it? Why do we have so many different religions, each claiming to represent the absolute? And why are they locked in deadly conflicts? Why do we have Islam versus Christian versus Jewish conflicts still going on in the Middle East, 1400 years after Muhammad's death? Can they be resolved? So that's what I've asked in my book on Being and Knowledge, which is, the first 2 volumes are published. The rest will take a little while to get together. And it's an homage to Hegel, to Heidegger, to Plato, to Parmenides, and all the other great thinkers of our planet. Because unlike, you see, Heidegger knew a bit about Oriental philosophy, but not that much.